I mix what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. Again, I'm Jared Ball, your host. Happy to be here. imixwhatilike.org, where you should really subscribe and make sure you're signed up so you don't miss any of the work that I and my colleagues and comrades do across multimedia and medium. And at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. Before we go any farther with our next guest, with our next guest, let me just quickly remind you again of some of the things coming up at imixwhatilike.org, which in fact we can just quickly have a look at here. Because after today's show, later today, of course, we have Max Blumenthal and a discussion of his work, Management of Savagery, which is kind of wild and informative and full of stuff that I think not enough of us are paying attention to. Of course, we have the next is that tomorrow, a discussion with Dr. Sharice Burden-Stelly, followed up by my brothers from WPFW right here in Washington, D.C., or down the road from me in Washington, D.C. Brother Kaba and Netfa Freeman of Black Alliance for Peace will join us for a discussion of broadcasting Africa. That is, their work is broadcasting the diaspora and to the diaspora and about the diaspora. So we want to talk about that as well. And then in the new year, we have a couple things with Dr. Lawrence Ball, no relation, at least that I'm aware of, at Johns Hopkins University, about the biggest banks and how, as he has reported recently and studied recently, them being in crisis might impact the rest of us. Again, some things about the economic system that we don't often hear about or talk about. So I'm looking forward to that. And then shortly thereafter, Dr. Mark Blythe, co-author of Angrynomics, a very interesting read, and someone who I think has provided perhaps a practical solution to my GDP question in the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. So please do get in the chat and comment section and prepare to engage with us today. Any comments or questions, we'll happily get to them as soon as possible. I do also want to remind folks, or let folks know, I did hear again from Sister Pam Africa as we continue to endeavor to keep up with political prisoners and, of course, the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. And please go and check those conversations out that we had with Dr. Todd Stephen Burroughs and Lynn Washington, parts 1 and 2. About Mumia and the MOVE movement and Mike Africa's film, HBO documentary, 40 Years Prisoner. Really good stuff there. But Pam is very busy, sister, obviously, and she's endeavoring to hook up with us, and we'll keep up. She's assured me she's going to come through, so we'll keep up with her. And please do go to the jerichomovement.com for an update on all issues related to political imprisonment and updates involving not only Mumia, but of course, Russell Maroon Schultz, most recently dealing with his own issues of repression, suppression, and COVID. Mutulu Shakur, of course, Jalil Muntaqim's recent release and attempted reincarceration. He's definitely in need of some support as well, and pressure put on the prosecutors of that, and many others. Obviously, still need some attention. So. All right, but without further ado, we're long overdue for a conversation with this brother here. I recently saw him on an incredibly good panel that, in fact, we'll have to link to, convened by leaders of a beautiful struggle up the other way in Baltimore, Maryland, who had a roundtable more or less about Black electoral politics and people in the state of Maryland doing work on those issues. And I was reminded of not only a number of people on the panel that we'll be reaching out to invite to this platform, But for some years now, I've been following and learning from the work of our next guest, Jonathan Hutto Sr., who has been an organizer with the ACLU around issues of police violence and accountability in Prince George's County, Maryland, for a number of years, and someone whose work and paths have overlapped with mine in a number of areas, and want to look for and want to have a conversation with, because what is going on in Prince George's County is applicable to the entire African diaspora. And since Prince George's County is among the richest Black populations in the country, if not the broader world, it's, I think, important to look at some of the contradictions that he raises and has been following for a long time. So, Brother Hutto Sr., welcome to the program. It is good to see you. Good morning and welcome.
Appreciate you, brother, Dr. Ball, for having me on. The scholar activist, scholar advocate, and yes, this conversation definitely long overdue. So again, thank you for having me on.
No, I appreciate that, and I look forward to it. Definitely. For those who may not be aware, and even for those of us who have lived in and around, I was born in DC, grew up out here in Howard County, where I live now. But PG County obviously is a mainstay for many of us, families and friends, either gentrified out of DC into PG County. Those of us hanging out in PG County. Those of us who have been hearing for our entire lives, and in some cases experiencing, unfortunately, our entire lives, of the particular level of violence and brutality of the police in PG County. They have a particular notorious, what's the word I'm looking for, reputation. But so I thought we would start with maybe you quickly explaining how this could be, and how it could also be that PG is in fact one of the, and I'll share some of the numbers that I have, and we'll ask you as well, one of the richest Black populations in the country, if not the world.
Yes, definitely. Prince George's County, Jared, first came into my consciousness when I was an undergraduate student at Howard University. At the time, the chairman of my department, Dr. Alvin Thornton, was also serving as the chair of the school board in Prince George's County. And so how he first came into my consciousness, the county, was that Alvin at the time led the effort to end school busing in Prince George's County as the chairman of the school board. And by doing so, he enlisted some fierce opposition from Black integrationists. One of them was a mentor of mine, a veteran of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the late Lawrence Giat. So Dr. Thornton was drawing fire. Once I graduated from Howard after 4 consistent years of student activism, student leadership, organizing, working very closely with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, I took on a position at the ACLU, as you mentioned, and I was charged with bringing together a broad-based coalition of stakeholders to reform the Citizens Complaint Oversight Panel. And I actually had called Dr. Thornton to help lead that effort. He was very candid with me in stating that education was his realm of advocacy, but he knew of persons that I could link with. And he linked me to some persons. The most critical and important for me was the family of Redmond and his late wife, Bunny Barnes, out of Paul Baptist Church. And it was out of that church, December of 1999, that we first had a meeting of what would soon become the Prince George's People's Coalition. And we're been going strong up and down, but more up than down for a little over 20 years now.
But could you tell us a little bit about the history of the county that again would create this contradiction between it being this, relatively speaking, wealthy Black community, but still having the kinds of struggles that it has in terms of police violence, education, as we'll talk a little bit about, I hope to maybe business ownership. How do we have that situation where you have Black people with, again, relatively speaking, all this money, but a confused, if not absent, relationship with actual power.
Absolutely. Prince George's County, going back decades, if you talk to laypersons in this county, but also if you look at the research, going back decades, was a county that was rural in terms of its construct. It was a majority white county decades ago, going back to the 1960s, but not just a majority white, but a rural white. For lack of a better framing, a redneck white. Okay, there's a paper that was written by Dr. Rodney Green and myself, came out in 2016, which chronicles this history. It chronicles the history of the struggle for police accountability from 1970 to 2015. It was published in 2016. You can bring that paper up there. But the county then began to
just so
go
people
through.
know, forgive me for interrupting, but just so people know, and I will bring it up, but we've linked to it in the YouTube section, and we'll have it in description section, and we'll have it at I Mix What I Like as well when this goes up there. But I'll bring it up here shortly. Yeah.
Awesome. But that paper, it shows the demographic shift coming directly out of the civil rights movement. The late Marion Barry would at times would brag in terms of how he believes single-handedly created Prince George's County, because what you had was the emergence of a black middle class in Washington, D.C., who then, once they obtained resources, began to penetrate Prince George's County, what Walter Fauntroy referred to numerous times as Ward 9. And as they began to penetrate the county, there began this clash between incoming influx of the black middle class in 1970s, but a sustained racist police force. And the case a generation ago, which really brought that to the fore, was the case of Terrence Johnson, which we document in the paper. Terrence Johnson, a young 15-year-old African-American male in 1978, he and his brother, Melvin, supposedly accused of messing with vending machines, and were taken to the Hyattsville police station and tortured and beaten almost to death until Terrence revolted, got his hands on a revolver, one of the police revolvers, and murdered one of his abusers. Took retribution is what we would say as revolutionaries. And so with that being stated, that became a symbol, if you will, of that struggle. If you come decades forward to the early 1990s, you now have this emerging black middle class that has now become has taken on power, if you will, but electoral power. Okay, what the late Kwame Ture would say, power that is not substance or ground in the grassroots. And so I'm going to end it here, but I'll say this much. My introduction to Prince George's County definitely showed that friction or that contradiction. May he rest in peace forever, rest in power. The late Prince Jones, my classmate, documented in Ta-Nehisi Coast, Between the World and Me. Many people said this. They still say it, that it was not supposed to happen to Prince Jones, not to someone who is an entrenched member of the black elite, not to someone who went to private white schools in Texas, military academies, not to someone who's a son of a Dr. Mabel Jones out of Philadelphia, not someone who lived in suburban Hyattsville. No, it was not supposed to happen to Prince, but it did. And what it showed was that even if you are an extension of the black elite, not just Prince Jones, Archie Elliott III, the son of a judge and a retired school teacher, Gary Hopkins Jr., the son of a retired bank president, if you find yourself black male predominantly, because this was mostly happening to black males at the time, on the other end of that police revolver, even if you came from the black middle class or the black elite, it would not draw any advocacy at all. The black electoral leadership, and I'm speaking specifically to those like the late Wayne Curry, those like Jack Johnson, those like the late, not the late, but Alex Williams, who was the first state's attorney. These people did not fight. And so it then makes us go back to that text of Charles Hamilton and Kwame Ture, Black Power, to reassess, well, well, what exactly was meant by black power? What is black power? If in fact we can get persons like us into electoral position, but it doesn't change the racist construct and the way the state applies racism systemic and endemic to our daily lives.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on any of those stories. I think we should elaborate a little bit on the Terrence Johnson story for one, but also, you know, if I remember correctly, the Prince Jones story.
Oh, no question. Yeah, Prince
Where,
Carmen Jones.
I mean, because if I remember
go ahead.
correctly, well, I was just hesitating because I was trying to remember this. But because the point was that the police followed him from DC into PG County and then executed him there. And if I'm not mistaken,
actually,
go ahead, man. Tell me. Go ahead. Let me stop. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. You definitely was on point with that, Doc. September 2000. Prince Jones, his roommate Bobby Calabrero, charter school principal over in DC. Prince was working at Alley's over in Hyattsville. He drove a black Jeep Cherokee. We all remember this car, you know, especially for those of us financial aid kids that didn't have cars. You know, Prince was a very sharp brother, always sharply dressed, and a spiritual too. Always had his Bible in his. Let's remember him. Prince was leaving his job in Hyattsville at Bally's, driving through DC on his way to Fairfax County, Virginia, where his girlfriend Candace Jackson lived. Okay, when he's driving through DC, he realized he's being followed. Okay, by an unmarked vehicle. He didn't realize it was a police officer following him. Okay, according to Carlton Jones, Prince Jones, according to him, a car like his had been seen in supposed drug activity neighborhoods. Okay. And the way Carlton Jones tells the story, because Prince didn't live to tell his side of the story. So Carlton tells a story that says that when Prince drove off on a side street in Fairfax, that Prince got out of the car and approached his vehicle, and then said that Prince used his vehicle as a weapon and rammed him, which then precipitated Carlton Jones shooting 6 shots, 5 of those shots going in Prince's back. Okay. But this was the case that drew the ear of not only the president of Howard University, but then the vice president of the United States, Al Gore. But it was an education for all of us, Jared, at that time, because not only did the Prince George's County leadership take any action, the state's attorney of Fairfax County at the time, Robert Horan, did not indict. Okay, the students of Howard, led by that then student body president, Solano Simmons, took a march to the Department of Justice. That's how we were able to get the overall pattern and practice investigation into the county at that time. But to then come to your original premise in terms of the role of black leadership, the first black chief of Prince George's County at that time, Gerald Wilson, when he left office in 2003, his last act was to exonerate Carlton Jones, the black officer, of any responsibility in regards to the Prince Jones case, to ensure that there'll be no indictment, no prosecution taken in that case. And so now today, you know, I'm in my early 40s now. So now I hear people, they'll raise Wayne Curry as a race champion. You know, I'll hear this stuff. You know, I'll be places and I'll be thinking to myself, well, race champion for who and for whom? Because I'm, you know, people, you know, Dorothy Elliott, you know, she's like a mother to me. You know, Gary, you know, Marion Hopkins, the mother Gary Hopkins, you know, she's like an auntie to me. You know, these are families that I'm deeply in relationship with. If you mention the name Wayne Curry to them, they don't get a sense of justice or a race champion. They get someone that fought and maintained the codification of the blue wall of silence. And so that was my foundational education in my early 20s that's carried forward to this very moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the one thing I would, well, when I hear you say the word education, I don't. The way I remember it is, it wasn't so much as an education that incident was for folks in this area, but it was uh, a more public proclamation of what many people have been talking about. It was a problem for a long time. I mean, I can't remember, honestly, a time in my life where PG County did not have a particularly bad reputation in terms of its police relationship with Black people. So to me, the Prince Jones incident, while more popular and certainly got more attention and maybe activated people differently, because in part of the class difference, that this was a good Howard University student, so-called, that had someone like Ta-Nehisi Coates writing about it, that it got more attention. But anyway, but it wasn't so much of as an education as it was like an alert. I don't know if you felt the same way or feel the same way. But I also want to try to just for some recent.
Let me
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me jump in on that point. That's a good point you made. It was for the Howard University populace who by and large were not from Prince George's County. It not only was an education, but it was shock treatment. It was shock to the bones and the veins and to the brains and to the very souls. For me personally, I'm going to say it was a part of my political education. I say political education because I'm coming out of Atlanta, Georgia, up this way. And so there certainly was a class divide in Atlanta as well. But I must say, I never had, and I'm tinkering on what I'm about to say. I don't want to say that there wasn't police brutality in Atlanta, Georgia, in this realm. There was, but it was not that same reputation. There wasn't. Furthermore, in Atlanta, Georgia, you would see a divide between Black advocates. My baptism into activism was the late Reverend Hosea Williams, for example, who was a House representative in Georgia, who led a historic march in Forsyth County, Georgia. So we would see Black advocates and elected Blacks who would take bold stands that folks like Andy Young, for example, wouldn't do. But see, in Prince George's County, we didn't even see that kind of divide. I didn't see Black elected folks challenging Wayne Curry. I didn't see that. There was like a unification in Prince George's County that I had not witnessed in Atlanta, Georgia, nor even in Washington, D.C. So it was a political education. Political, indeed.
I put up the numbers here for some work that I was a part of, a minor part of, that's coming out next month on Black businesses, and PG County showed up in the research. We were looking at it a little bit, in part because of the anomaly that it represents, starting with the fact that, as we're showing here, $82,695 is the Black median household income in PG County, and it gets close to the white median income, which is $89,000, which is something that doesn't happen very often. In fact, anywhere else in the country, as far as I was able to, as I think we were seeing. And in fact, most of the median incomes of Black communities in the top 10 other areas in the country are half or less than half that of Black people in PG County. But as you're just describing, the relationship with the police doesn't change at all, and in fact seems even worse on some levels. And one of the reasons, one of the many factors that I'm wondering if you could elaborate on, that I know your paper talks about in some ways in terms of the history of the county, is I'm wondering to what extent is this a relationship to a couple of things. One, PG County's Black population is largely the result of DC being gentrified and Black communities being pushed out into the county. And is also related to the fact that many of these Black residents have federal government employment. Because one of the things we looked at was that even though PG County has, I think, 58% of its businesses are Black owned in the county, they don't generate significantly more revenue for those businesses, in part because they are in the smaller, sectors of the economy. They're not the bigger businesses. And the fact, and relatively speaking, the fact that they do better in some cases than other Black businesses is not because of Black business acumen necessarily, but because of a Black consumer base in the county that is stronger than others, almost as a crazy anomaly. That is, it's different in PG County than anywhere else. So where there does appear to be some more money floating around and business being developed, again, this relationship to power and control or sovereignty or safety, or even the control over the biggest, institutions of the community, including the police or education, are struggling. So is there? So what? I don't know, as we sort of get to the midway point of the conversation, I want to ask you sort of what is it that you are advocating that people do in the county? And then how can those of us in surrounding areas or even nationally support that work or duplicate it to the extent possible where they are? And
Very
feel
good question.
anything else that I said too, by the way.
Very good question, Jared. Questions, plural. Very meaty. I wouldn't expect nothing less from Dr. Ball. Couple pieces I want to say. One of the pieces you hit on in terms of the median income really indicates why we have never seen, certainly not in my time, and I've been organizing in Prince George's County since late 1999. Even before then, we have not seen. We've seen some mass resistance, but it hasn't hit the level of what we've seen in Ferguson, for example, or what we saw in Baltimore in 2016. And it's because of that class nature and that class aspect. In Prince George's County, you do have a deeper, more entrenched Black middle upper strata. They live in communities like Mitchellville. They live in communities like Fort Washington. They live in Cheverly, for example. They live in communities that they're not only entrenched, but very protective. I mentioned Dr. Alvin Thornton earlier. And let me preface what I'm about to say. I love Dr. Alvin Thornton. He's very instrumental to my development. But Dr. Alvin Thornton also symbolizes an aspect of what I'm talking about here, because when I first met Dr. Thornton as an undergraduate student, he was the elected chairman of the Prince George's County School Board that led the fight to end forced school busing and to put those resources back into Black communities, into the Black neighborhood schools. The same Alvin Thornton, coming 20 plus years later, then becomes the appointed chairman of the school board, because half the school board now is appointed directly by the county executive. He's appointed as chairman. And now you have an Alvin Thornton who is in opposition to the young progressives on the school board, who are pushing, for example, to get police officers, school resource officers, SROs, out of the schools. Alvin Thornton is the bulwark there, holding the line for the county executive. This is Alvin now coming 20 plus years later. Okay, Alvin Thornton now, who's bringing in the public-private partnership, if you will, in terms of using private money to build public schools in the county. He recently resigned as chairman of the school board. He didn't give a reason as to why he resigned. But those of us who've known him for decades, we see what was happening. And if he is symbolic of that, because there was a time when he was referred to as an advocate, as an activist, then we see what the class construct and that deep class integration, if you will, or assimilation, what it does to advocacy, to genuine advocacy and genuine resistance. What must be done? What can people do? You and I share a friend and comrade, Obi Egbuna Jr. And in my formative years, Obi was one of the best political educators, if not the best political educator in my life as an organic educator. One of the things Obi would always point out when he had a chance that he was around me and others was this difference, this contrast between what he would call genuine community organizing, genuine resistance, and what he called Democratic Party support work. Work that really is directly connected to the Democratic Party machine. We have to build and sustain genuine organization in our community. We have to have our people join genuine organizations. I built a coalition, a voluntary coalition known as the Prince George's People's Coalition, comprised of grassroots, indigenous-based organizations. We have to have people join organizations in the spirit of terrain, and then in that spirit, then build coalitions and united fronts on the ground to wage struggle. That's the only way we can do it. And we have to lift up the example of people like Kwame, people like Charlie Cobb, people like my late mentor, the late Lawrence Guillot, people who left college, people like the late Marion Barry, for example. Eleanor Holmes, no, even though she's Torah, but still, people who left college and committed a form of class suicide and used their technical assistance and their skills to build deep in the working class and deep within the underclass and the marginalized class. That's the only way we're going to get it, Jared. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see the production, because the Democratic Party works very hard to produce their warriors that fight for their class interests. We have to be doing the same exact level of work. And let me stop right here and say, and be consistent with it over time. Like I said, I first came to Prince George in 1999, 2020. I'm still here. So we can't use this work, because now we've seen this as well. And you've talked about this in some of your earlier writings, how even what we see as a community organizer, Barack Obama, for example, say he was a community organizer. I'm glad to see a refocused on Fred Hampton, for example, and what a community organizer is supposed to be. Someone that gives, as the late George Jackson said, give your life to the people. That's the only way that we're going to be able to do it. So the Prince George's People's Coalition, find us on Facebook, our page, the Prince George's People's Coalition. Let's join up and let's build. And lastly, I got to give a shout out to that emerging organization that has emerged, Community Justice, led by frontline women, Kima Harris, Nikki Owens, Tracy Shan. These are mothers, sisters, and cousins of those who have been stolen and taken from us by the Prince George's County Police in recent years.
Yeah, we have to try to maybe work with you to stay in touch with them, and maybe give them some more of a platform as well. I'm down to help with that. If you all think that can help, please let me know, and please also feel free to send me any links, even right now in the private chat, or comment, or send them to me, and we can put the links to all these groups that you want to support up with this and out with the replay later. Peace to Ricky Ryan, who raises a question here that I'd like to, I don't know anything about this, and would like to hear you talk about it. The Maryland Law Enforcement Officer Bill, or I should say, I know other than its existence, I don't know anything, what's going on with that, and what is it looking to do, and how's it going?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The listener that raised what's known as the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, acronym LEOBOR. Maryland passed this law in the early 1970s, one of the first in the country, in 1974 to be exact, and it was duplicated in a number of states. Our studies have shown that it's the most draconian law in the country. It gives police officers special rights that go above and beyond the rights that are granted to lay persons. I first came into Maryland to organize a little over 20 years ago. We learned about this law was that, number one, when there was an act of excessive force, an officer shoots and kills someone, there's 10 days that officer was not questioned. Okay. And when the officer was questioned, they can only be questioned by other officers. Okay. If you had a complaint against this officer, you had 90 days to file it. I mean, these were the kind of provisions within the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights. Their records are sealed. For I mentioned Dorothy Elliott earlier. She's struggling right now to still get the record of her son's case almost 30 years after it happened. Her son killed in District Heights, handcuffed in a police cruiser, 20 plus shots. Still trying to get the records from a black state's attorney, Aisha Brave Boy. That struggle is happening. It's ongoing right now as we speak. So there's a statewide coalition of 85 organizations. I want to give a shout out to Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle and also the ACU for heading up that statewide coalition of 85 plus organizations. The chair of the Maryland House, Adrian Jones, has called for the abolishment and eradication of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. There's going to be a leadership bill, and we're going to push it all the way. But Jared, we're not going in there half-cocked or naive. The Fraternal Order Police are going to bring all of their guns, literally and figuratively,
I was going
to
to say
Annapolis.
literally and figuratively.
Yeah, and if people want to get a sense of how they throw down, go to the documentary Baltimore Rising. There's a segment in there that shows how the Fraternal Order Police come to advocate. Just about all the politicians in the state of Maryland are in the hip pocket of the FOP. So for all the listeners out here, when all goes out for you to get you to get your testimony in, for you to be on board, we need it all over the state of Maryland in order to get this done. Because we see how the FOP throws down, and here in Prince George's County, we're already seeing Black Democrats line up with the FOP. So our work is cut out for us.
Yeah, I would have to also suggest people also, not specific to Maryland, but if people are watching documentaries on the police, they got to watch Do Not Resist. That's really the only one I would recommend. And with all due respect to Baltimore Rising and its inclusion of LBS in it, it has so many problems with it because, yeah, they show you the FOP in operation, but then they also show you the propaganda of the FOP at play too, with the police community relations programs and all that kind of stuff. I got too many problems with that joint there, but I hear you. And if people watch it with the lens you've created for us, okay. But please also check out Do Not Resist for a more, I think, accurate depiction of how the police see themselves. I think we should just leave it at that.
I totally agree with you there on that. Yeah, Baltimore Rising did not have a what we would call a line of march. It certainly didn't. But that particular segment on the FOP in Annapolis, I thought was very right on. Yeah, right on. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough for that. Fair enough. And in fact, I'm trying to get to the. I need another interview with the Eugene's People Party anyway. So yeah, definitely join them. There's a question I saw here that came up. I would love for you to address if I could. I thought I had it. If I could let me just find it because it was about. Let's see. Here we go. Can you ask Jonathan about Peace Fatima, by the way? Can you ask Jonathan about the housing issues in PG, remembering the Washington Post article of a few years ago? I'm not sure exactly what she's referring, but just in general, are there a particular set of housing issues you are all focused on in PG County?
The Prince George's County People's Coalition, there's an organization within our coalition, the Mount Rainier Organization for Racial Equality, that has been taking on the housing fight and the housing struggle directly, specific to stopping evictions. They're very much focused in Rainier, stopping evictions and pretty much getting landlords to let up, if you will, in this current COVID crisis that we're in. I want to give a shout out to Linda Green, who has been working very closely with Mount Rainier Organization for Racial Equality. But what we have seen in the past decade in Prince George's County is the influx of our people, as you stated earlier, Jerry, our people being pushed out of the district, forced Black exodus out of the district. And the only forms of affordable housing, if you want to use the word affordable, because they're more affordable in comparison to the district, doesn't mean it's affordable, is in southern yeah, is in southern Prince George's County, specific those communities closest to the Beltway, and those communities are where we experience the bulk of the police harassment and brutality. It's not a coincidence. Again, what's referred to as Ward 9. I know Angela Alsabrook and the electoral leadership despise that reference, but it's the truth. And so that intersection, if you will, of housing, forced black exodus, police brutality, southern Prince George's County. And so again, we got to struggle, fight. We got to just continue to be organized and be on the lines.
This is perfect, actually. Of course it would be, because and people can go back and see me do it live, where I canceled my Amazon Prime membership during our conversation with Chris Smalls to support their strike. But in fact, at mixwhatilike.org, I even did a review about a couple of films a couple of years ago and mentioned the fact that, and talked about Do Not Resist, and talked about the fact that the reason it's only on Amazon, at least Amazon at the time, and apparently on Prime now only, was that after it won a contest put on by Netflix, it won a documentary film festival contest put on by Netflix. Netflix wanted them to make too many changes, and the director said no. So they canceled the victory and deplatformed it from Netflix, and that's why it's on Amazon. And when you see it, it's clear, because again, it's cinema verite in the sense that there's no narration, no acting, no script. It's just a guy with a camera following the police around in their training and in their work, and it's just obvious. I mean, it just you don't need to say anything else. And it, to me, is the most powerful. I can't remember seeing something more powerful as a documentary about how the police actually think of themselves and how they behave than that. So I'm not surprised that it's stuck on Prime only. I don't know if you addressed this specific question specifically, Jonathan, but is there something more specifically that people around the country or world could do to support the efforts related to this Leo Bohr issue that you were just describing? Is there something particular? And then it's sort of as a parallel question, I'm wondering, when you and Linda and others doing this work need to get the word out, what media outlets do you use? Where do you go to get the word out about what people can do to support your work? And then what do you ask them to do when you do get the word out?
Thank you, Jared, for that question. That first question there, I believe that came from my brother Carlos up there in Maryland. He's an alumnus. You and Carlos share the same undergraduate institution, Frostburg State.
Shout out to Frostburg. All right, what's up, Carlos?
Yeah. In terms of organizations, so for example, our coalition is based with Prince George's County, Prince George's People's Coalition. Okay, within our coalition is organizations like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, organizations like Community Justice I mentioned earlier. So all of us have platforms. The only platform that I'm using to keep our coalition together, or using mainly, is Facebook, in terms of information, keeping folks together. In terms of as a statewide organization, the ACLU is a statewide organization that's working with our coalition. Casa de Maryland is both regional and even has national owners that's working with our coalition as well. The NAACP is also working for Leo Bohr. If they're not directly in our coalition, but certainly the NAACP is working for police reform. But let me say this, and I know this is an audience that this can be said, but I would say it anywhere. Even with the eradication of Leo Bohr, if we're able to make that happen, that's not going to eradicate police racist murder in this country. It's only fitting that we get rid of special rights and privileges that officers have. We're going to have to continue to be vigilant and use all forms of resistance to bring about the society that we want, that we must have. In terms of the platforms that we're using, every platform that's out, to my understanding. So, for example, community justice. This is an organization led by directly impacted women. Shout out again to Kima Harris, the mother of Kevin Sneed. She fought and organized for her son's life. He was being charged with assaulting a police officer, and fought against a plea bargain in that situation. They attempted to have him admit some level of guilt for a plea bargain. She fought against that. She was able to get attorneys. Not only got a non-conviction, got his record totally clean, but then became an organizer herself and built an organization. And she uses every platform available: Facebook, Instagram, what have you. I mean, these are dynamic women that I'm proud and both humbled and honored to be in solidarity and working with them. So we're going to look them up again in Prince George's County. Look them up on the social media platforms as well. So that's how we've been pushing out. But again, let me just say this: if you're not in an organization, you've got to get in an organization. Okay, there's no organization that exists where you are, and you got some energy. Then, to the degree that you can, we've got to build some organization, because that's the only way we're going to get it. You know, in terms of conscientious and aware, that's part of it. As the late Imam Jamil taught us in our foundational youth, the highest form of struggle is that struggle that takes place within the individual. But once it consolidates itself, it then has to begin to engulf the environment. When we talk about the engulf the environment aspect, that's the aspect of organization. And so if after this, I'm gonna leave my information here for anyone that wants help and assistance in getting in an organization or building an organization. Certainly reach forward to me, and we'll get you the resources and the connections and the human relationships to make that happen.
Absolutely, and please feel free to have you and anyone in your coalition, reach out to me if this platform can help. I'm happy to do it, or in any other way to help that work get some more attention or discussion. Yeah, absolutely. No, you got to pay for Do Not Resist. But I think I might actually buy that joint. That's how much I like it. So I don't, I think that work deserves support. But there were a couple questions in the chat about the class contradictions in PG County, which I know you touched on a little bit, but I would just want to sort of re-ask that question in this way by asking, well, two things in terms of these broad, big questions. One, well, before I forget, the two things are: one, you apply a Marxist analysis in your work on PG County, or you talk about at least applying a Marxian approach. And I'm wondering if what that means for you, why you think that's important, and what it told you or what it reveals about PG County. And then similarly, in a sort of different way, I got a question offline about the Proctor family. Which I know has an infamous reputation. I don't know, if you have any experience with that family, or have any, thing you would want to share about that. I know I do. So those two things: the class and Marxist contradictions in PG, and then the racial aspect of it in terms of the Proctor family.
Okay, so the first question in terms of the Marxian approach of the paper, let me say that the paper was written jointly between myself and Dr. Rodney Green. Dr. Rodney Green, former chairman of the economics department at Howard University, is an ideological Marxist and a long-term member of the Progressive Labor Party. So in terms of the deep Marxian analysis, I'm going to have to credit him for that, but not because I'm anti-Marxist, just that I don't have the same Marxist consolidation that he has. He and I share the same class critique, Prince George's County and of the state, where he and I differ, and it's a friendly difference, but a difference nonetheless, is that Rodney Green labors as a sectarian. He labors as one who fights to consolidate folks within the Labor Party, which is a Stalinist party, which looks to obtain state power in that way, in that Stalinist tradition. In terms of where I come at it politically, I'm I'm more along the lines of where C.L.R. James was later in his life, late 1960s, in terms of the Hungarian Revolution. I'm more along the lines of direct people's democracy. I don't labor as a sectarian. I have a strong class critique, but I believe in voluntary, cooperative, collective movements in a voluntary way. I don't believe in a rigid sectarian ideology. I do believe in being ideological, but in the spirit of Grace Lee Boggs, I believe that even in being ideological, we have to continue to question deeply the framework within which we struggle, because everything is in a constant state of flux, if you will, and so we can't become, for lack of a better terms, enslaved with an ideology. In other words, I don't labor as an ideologue and never have. Although I find myself in coalition and working alongside ideologues, because because I'm also participatory in that way. So yes, Rod and I do affectionately refer to him as Rod. We do share the same class critique, but probably not the same line of march in terms of a way forward. And if he's listening to this, I'm probably going to hear from him afterwards.
Hey, tell him to reach out to me too. We can talk to. We are happy to talk to him. I'm down to. I'm down to rap with anybody, particularly anybody left of the Democratic Party can find at least time for. I'll find a conversation time for them, for sure.
Definitely. In terms of the Proctor family, Doc, you got to educate me. I'm drawing the blank. Who and what is the Proctor family? I'm drawing the blank.
Well, the Proctor family, and anybody in the chat want to get in here, feel free, has a long and sort of notorious reputation in PG County as being one of the fairer skinned black families that intentionally looks to keep itself that way. That have gone over a long period of I don't know, centuries even, to maintain a certain lighter complexion in their bloodline. And in fact, I went to you mentioned Frostburg. I was in Frostburg with a member of that family, and who frankly told me and other people that this was openly discussed in their family, and that he was encouraged to mate with a white woman, and if not that, at least an extremely fair-skinned black woman, as a fallback to make sure that there wasn't too much melanin in their bloodline. And it's sort of always just sort of been, for me at least, as far as I can remember, a kind of a notorious extreme example of the impact of white supremacy on African people in this country, and in that county in particular, where you have. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I could definitely jump into this on this level here. My mother my mother was born 1947, segregated apartheid, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And she always described herself as a survivor of colorism within the United States and the deep impact of it. I did not realize what colorism really was, because my mother talked about it, but it seemed historical to me. Although we would make little jokes to each other as kids, but nothing that seemed institutional. But I didn't see and feel institutional colorism until I arrived at Howard University and looked at the upper leadership of Howard University, from the president to the upper cabinet to the vice presidents, all the way down to the dean of students, dean of housing, all the way down to my dorm director. You had to be a fair-skinned black person, by and large, to be anywhere in the leadership of how, it was daunting to me. I looked around the campus like, now, the student body didn't look that way. The professors didn't look that way, but the deans, vice presidents. So yeah, that was, in fact, there's a couple of pictures I'll share with you after this broadcast, because when I was in the student leadership, I would always be in these photos with light-skinned blacks, and my mother would just kind of give me a wink, like, I told you. Didn't I tell you? You know, so it was very, again, political education for me early on, but validation really from what my mother had taught me.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother Netfa had a question that I wanted to have you address as we unfortunately start to have to move towards a close. At least here, I want to see where did it go? Where did it go? Thankfully, and I appreciate the vigorous conversation going on in the chat, which is making it a little more difficult to find this particular one. But he had a particular question. Netfa, if you're still watching, I might have to ask you to go ahead and ask it again because I can't find it, and I lost track of it in the chat. But it was a question. First of all, shout out to Morgan State and B. More Akuma, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There is, this class issue, class and colorism is still a persistent issue. And in my classes, every semester this comes up. And literally every semester in almost every class. But Jonathan, could you speak to this issue of community control, defund, and abolish the police as it relates to PG County? Where are the various movements and calls and slogans finding foothold in your work?
Good question. And shout out to Netfa Freeman. That's my brother throughout the years and decades now. In terms of defunding the police, abolishing the police, in terms of what I would say is your more radical revolution foothold in Prince George's County, it would definitely find a home, or has a base rather, within community justice. I would say of all the organizations on the ground, I'm gonna give a strong plug to community justice again on that front. And in terms of some of the other organizations that we've worked with, I'm in connection and in relationship with most of them. But the deeper defund the police demand is going to come more from the actual directly impacted persons. What I find in this work over the years and decades is that the people who hold the strongest and the people who don't sell out, for lack of a better framing, are those whose family members were sacrificed and stolen. When we get into persons who are careerists, persons who are trying to leverage, if you will, the social capital of this movement. I never forget when I was in my early 20s, being at a big Enough is Enough rally in Annapolis and seeing a young, aspiring Martin O'Malley at the rally, or seeing, other aspiring politicians where the mothers and the family members. So that's where it finds a foothold. But I will also say that we also have a deeper responsibility, and I'm going to hold myself accountable to this as well, to do a deeper political education on that to ensure, because part of the reason why the career politicians and even some of these advocates from within the police department can sometimes get a foothold amongst us is because we haven't done the deep political dive and the deep political education, which I know NETFA has done consistently over the years there in DC and throughout the region. So we have responsibility to do that as well, but to also realize that even in defunding the police, community control of the police is where we're going to have to go as really a step to abolishing the whole construct of policing. Let's just be clear about that. Policing within the capitalist state does not work for us. When I say us, I'm talking about the working class, disproportionately Black and brown people, African people. It doesn't work for us. Okay, so but that's a longer term trajectory. You got to start with first, but longer term, we're going to have to get a bite of that apple, and it's going to have to start on the ground where we are.
Brother Hutto, I don't know how you doing on time. I don't want to rush you, and we got a number of comments and questions still coming in. But
if you got time, Doctor, I can hang 7 to 10 more minutes. Come on.
Well, yeah, I can definitely do that. And listen, I have been wanting. Look, I have started and stopped projects on this for years now. This question here about comparisons between PG and Howard, and particularly a look at Howard County, where I live now and primarily grew up. But one thing, just looking it up quickly, and I don't know if you have any updates on this. This number here, but in terms of percentage of Black residents in Maryland, PG County is at the top. These are from 2012 census, which is, I believe, still the most recent that would be available. But somebody can check me on that. And Howard County is listed down here around at 18% in terms of percentage of the Black population. And what I find particularly interesting about that is that one thing I'll say before I turn it over to you is that one, Howard County does a remarkable job of masking inequality and has always done so, I think. Howard County, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is rated even most recently this year as the best county to live in the country, regardless of race. They don't break, at least that wasn't broken down, but just its schools are always rated among the top in the country. But within Howard County schools, it has some of the leading rates of segregation, primarily in advanced or AP classes. And the other thing I've noticed, but I haven't done enough research to make any conclusive findings, so-called. But I noticed that, for instance, that the elementary school that my daughters went to was not most closest to us by proximity, and was almost entirely Black and brown. So in a county that's only 18% Black, I promise, I think in the years they went there, I don't think they ever had more than one, maybe two white students in a class, if any at all. So even within a county that is so majority white and affluent and relatively considered the best to live in, there are these enormous inequalities that still exist in terms of space, where, social space, physical space. Black people have nowhere to hang out in Howard County. Where I don't know where Black people go to hang out in Howard County, which is why so many of us in my entire life have either gone to Baltimore or DC. As soon as we could get in a car, we were going either to Baltimore or DC. And then in terms of the education piece, I was just saying, like this busing, this little quiet busing that goes on, and quiet pockets of overt racism, and then the quietness of building more affluent communities, even in Howard County, where traditionally there had been rules or policies for how much public housing you had to include. That's even getting wiped away. They're building more exclusive and affluent communities and hidden communities. So anyway, those are some of the differences. And then certainly we don't have the overt police violence targeting the smaller segment of Black population in Howard County, and it doesn't have the notorious reputation as PG does. But anyway, that's my quick summary comparison. Go ahead.
Oh, the theme you speak to for me, and I was just in a social media conversation with an old buddy of mine from Howard University. He lives in Gwinnett County, Georgia now. He posed a question on social media, and it sparked a heck of a discussion. He posed a question. He said, what's best? He said, for the Black middle class. He said, should I buy a house at $250,000 and send my kids to private school? Mm-hmm. Or he said, should I buy a home at $500,000 and send my kids to the neighborhood schools there? And I thought about what I was the product of. I was the product of neither. I was the product of parents who intentionally bought a home or start a home in a Black working class neighborhood, and a mother who was a college educated working class person who went to war in them schools to fight to make them schools better. So my analysis was, if ideally, and I always say ideally because you can't always do what's ideal, but ideally, we need folks who actually will go in and do the necessary work in the public school environment to make it better for the entire community. You speak to the theme of the failure of the integrationist model from where I sit. The failure of that model in terms of serving the needs of people. We mentioned Prince Jones earlier, someone who was snatched, and he came out of that integrationist model. I'm reminded that Trayvon Martin was living in a gated community in Sanford, Florida, actual gated community, and was walking to a 7-Eleven from that community. I don't live in a gated community. I live right here in Suitland, Maryland. Every kid that walks to that 7-Eleven down the street from me, I know all of them. I'm Mr. Hutto. If they out there late at night, they be walking fast. They know I'm gonna ask them, why you outside at 10 o'clock at night? So there's a certain returning. You know, when I was growing up, if I rode my bike past a certain point, my mother already done got 3 or 4 phone calls. So that model, and I'm not saying that blacks in Howard County should go on an exodus out of Howard County, but I am saying that we're going to have to, and I'm talking ideally, go more inward. There's a difference between self-determination and segregation, and for us to be more self-determining in terms of actually seizing the time to create that which we're going to have to create for ourselves moving forward. The case of Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia, the brother can't even jog through a white neighborhood. See, that's certain. See, we got to be. We may just be the only severely marginalized people on the planet, maybe, who after all of this, we still fight to integrate and assimilate in a culture that obviously is very harmful to us. So I'm not a separatist, but I'm also not an integrationist. I'm exactly where Du Bois was on that question. I believe in self-determination. We're going to have to make our communities, because I take a little bit from everybody. Minister Louis Farrakhan has always said we got to make our communities a safe and a safe place to live. We've got to do that, as best we can, while pushing for the power structure. To give us everything that we've earned and deserved.
Yeah, it's not so much a disagreement, but I maybe it's just me being defensive here, but I think that I bristle a little bit at the suggestion that the black population in Howard County is a result of integrationism. And I say that to say because again, part of what is masked in this experience is the and maybe it is, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong, but it's the allure of public policy and promise. So it wasn't that. So I'm not talking about the in this situation, the class divide of a bougie elite who willfully and with resources and options says, I want to leave the black community and move out to Howard County and be one of the few black families. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those even like my own and the community I lived in initially out here, which was encouraged to come out here because of Section 8 vouchers, where you could get a 2-bedroom apartment with central air conditioning and a balcony for $14 a month. And to this day, you get that same basic based on your income in certain pockets. And you get the promise of, so maybe it is, maybe I'm just being wrong here, but or just wrong and being biased, and defensive. But you get the promise of the benefits of the what you've built, as to your point, in terms of a good access to a better school system, et cetera, and so forth. But what is masked is that what ends up happening is that you get out here a resegregated experience where the neighborhood we lived in was 95% black and all poor, even out here in Columbia, Maryland. Or you end up with a situation where even in the 2020s, my children are going to a largely segregated elementary school. Now, you could say from our point of view, this is great because not only did they get to go to school with a bunch of black and brown kids, and they got extra resources because of the ways I think it's Title I gets redistributed based on these racial and income discrepancies. So they actually got a better experience than the norm, relatively speaking. But it was obvious that it was a busing and racialized, segregated experience when the school that we live closer to is all more rich and white, and obviously saying we don't want those kids over here. So anyway, so that's just my response. Like, it wasn't like I don't know that it's so much this conscious desire among black people to leave Baltimore and DC, or to leave black communities. One, they end up back in a black community, even out here. But it's just that allure of saying, look, you can look $14 a month, and you get a 2-bedroom apartment instead of living in someone's attic. Anyway, but go ahead, man, and then respond to what I've said, and then take any last comments. And wrap us up.
Okay.
And I, I appreciate you.
Definitely appreciate you too, Doc. And what tends to happen, I find, with my peers who were educated in majority white settings, because these were most of my peers at Howard University. Although I went to a black institution, most of my peers didn't come up the way I did. They weren't around, so for example, my roommate at Howard University, Chris Wingfield, his father taught at Howard. He went to boarding school. His friends weren't friends like, he didn't have friends like me that went to public school and rode the train, for example, worked at Six Flags over the summer, So it was an experience that we were both sharing with each other, and we moved to this very day. But what I will say is that for our people who grow up in more integrationist settings, they're like I mentioned earlier, there's a deep treatment about the deep reality of racism in this country. I'm reminded of that young man from Chicago who went to college at UVA. Must have been about 7-8 years ago. He was a victim of police brutality in Virginia, but I never forgot his face because the police jumped him right outside of a club, a wrongful identity situation. The young man is on the ground with blood streaming down his face, and they got the knee to his back, Jared, and got his hands behind his back. And the young man, young brother out of Chicago, he kept shouting repeatedly to these officers, "I go to UVA. I go to UVA." He kept saying, "I go to UVA." Really saying is, I'm not one of them. Why you got your knee in my back? And then he said I went to UVA about that 10th time. Then he police racist because it hit him that to these police officers, no, I don't. To hell if I go to UVA. To these police officers, I'm an NIGGER. That's exactly what I am. And that's what they're going to demonstrate here today. And so then again, it's that coming back home, if you will, no matter where we are, that we have to have, as the late Imam Mubaraka called for decades ago, the call for nation time. This understanding that we can have to be uniform. We don't have to be uniform to be unified. That we have to have an operational unity. So I'll end with this. We have to have an operational unity amongst our people. If you're a black nationalist, if you're a black integration, you're a Pan-Africanist, you're a black Marxist, you're a black anarchist, you're a black agnostic, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hebrew Israelite, however you come, whatever your identity is, as the late Malcolm taught us, Al-Hajj Malik, brother Omawali, it's not our numerators. It is that common denominator as to why we catch the hell we catch within the United States and set it throughout this world. And so I'm laboring in that vein of bringing our people, helping to bring our people together here locally in Prince George's County as a connection to the Black throughout the United States and throughout the world. And I want to thank you, Jared, for creating a platform such as this for us to build with our posse and build with the tribes, if you will, to continue to bring us together, to bring about that society that we must have. Piece by piece, we're going to get some peace. sooner or later. So I want to thank you.
I man, you did it perfectly, and I hate to mess up your ending, but Sister Fellows here, I think, as you know, I think we've addressed this question, but is there Black power in the most affluent county in the country?
Want to give a salute to Sister Carletta Fellow. She was my school board member here some years ago. Good to see you. Is there Black power in Prince George's County? The key word that she's using is power. Power meaning the power to self-define, the power to self-determine, the power for us to be to project and to define ourselves going forward. I would have to say no. We do not have a full Black power in Prince George's County. We do have Black representation. We do have Black elected officials, but in terms of the power that can ensure that Black and brown lives are not stolen, to Kima Harris and her son Kevin Sneed, no. To Leonard Shan, who lost his life in Hyattsville in a hail of bullets, no. To too many lives that have been stolen throughout Prince George's County, too many lives have been subjugated, to a school system that is not equally funded, to school systems throughout the state of Maryland, and sadly to a leadership that has failed to speak and act truth to power on behalf of all of us in this regard. The answer is no. We have not obtained Black power, but we're on a path to obtaining it. We're definitely on a path to obtaining it, but it's going to take a transformation of the system itself. We're not going to be able to get it, in my opinion, within the current construct that we're in. So we're going to have to labor within that construct in order to transform it and make it something that works best for us. We've seen a few models. Maybe Jackson might be a model. I know that might be a discussion for another program if Jared hasn't already done that. I know some people are pointing to Newark, New Jersey. I think that's debatable for me. But we've got to get a model that works for our people. We got to continue to go.
No, right on. No, Kali Akuno is set to join us at some point, but we haven't had the Jackson conversation, at least in this platform yet. We have had it, and folks can go check out imixwhatilike.org for previous conversations, but in this version, no, not yet. But Jonathan Hutto Sr., man, thank you very much for joining us and breaking all this stuff down. We'll have to do this again, obviously, whenever you all want, and please put us in touch with those community groups you're talking about. And thanks again, man. Keep up the good work. We appreciate you. And to all of you, I want to thank you all for joining us for this conversation. Please do continue to like, share, and subscribe to those comments in the chats that we didn't get to. I apologize, but keep the conversation going, obviously, and we will here as well. And please, if you can, not only go to imixwhatilike.org and subscribe and sign up there and check all of the previous discussions and work that we've done there, but come back tonight at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time for our conversation about the management of savagery with Max Blumenthal. So with that, thanks again to everybody, to Brother Jonathan, to all of you. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind. I mix what I like.